Hello and welcome to the SME Focus show powered by MTDCNC. I'm Mark Weymouth from the Sensor Specialist Plus Automation. If you're new to the show, or as a reminder, the show aims to highlight aspects of UK manufacturing or topics of interest to SMEs. My guest today is Morgan Holden, co-founder of manufacturing and engineering recruitment company Alexandrite Recruitment, and more recently the founder of Obsidian Global Recruitment. Hi Morgan, welcome to SME Focus.
Good afternoon, thank you for having me.
Thanks for being on. Right, let's kick off with your going back in time to your beginnings-ish. I think you left school and you trained and worked as a roofer, which will make one of my neighbours very happy. But you defected from God's purpose and switched to sales. So I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about your experience in sales, particularly working at the coalface of sales, so to speak. So I think you did 7 years selling insurance before moving to call centre management at two renewable energy companies. So can you tell us a little bit about those and the following 3 years when you were selling office products, media and marketing? So tell us about your career in sales.
Thank you. Looking back, it doesn't seem like much of a career. I never chose the career path that I ended up in. I became sick of physical labour involved in roofing. Felt like I wasn't using my brain to the best of its ability, and it's also blooming freezing up on the roof in December and January and February. A friend of mine landed a position with Swinton Insurance in Norwich. He had no previous sales experience, hit the ground running, explained to me that you were sat in a warm office with a coffee machine nearby, paid a reasonable basic salary and the opportunity to earn additional money through bonuses. And that was enough for me to want to venture away from the roof and plant myself firmly in a warm, comfortable seat in a warm office. I hit the ground running myself, found I had quite a knack for sales, for speaking, for talking to people. And progressed very quickly, taking inbound calls, selling personal accident products and personal injury and products like that for Swinton. I was a top performer there. I then progressed on to team management and training roles in there. And yeah, I did that for about 7 years, and that was really where I got the love for sales in the first place. At school, was never really pointed in that direction or had my eyes open to the world of sales or the possibility. And having not done very well at school, I never thought that I would have the opportunity to, without a qualification, earn such good money, essentially. And that was where I began the sales process, essentially.
Okay.
So,
was it
go on.
Sorry, I was going to say, was it the team management roles and that sort of interaction with staff that really got you interested in the personnel side of things, or was what caused to transition away from traditional sales?
I think for me, I've always been interested in people. What makes people tick, what gets people out of bed in the morning, and to what ends people are getting up and going to work for. Is it for the passion of the job? Is it to support their hobbies? And then seeing people develop as well. I didn't know that I had the skill that I had in terms of sales. So for me, it was an eye-opener. And then seeing other people with the same potential who didn't realize that they had that potential, and then helping them develop and nurture that to the point where they were actually able to see, oh, hang on a minute, here's a skill that I was never taught at school or never supported in developing. And in the same way that I did, a whole new world was opened up to them.
Okay, cool. So after the period in sales and really talking more about the main agenda for this chat, June 2016, you co-founded Alexandrite Recruitment. And as I said in the intro, you've served the sort of engineering manufacturing sectors in East Anglia and beyond.
Yes.
Quite often I'll try and give a musical signpost to a time point. So June 2016, apparently Drake was #1 for 3 weeks with one dance, which I don't think anybody's going to remember. But interestingly, he kept Justin Timberlake and Can't Stop That Feeling from ever reaching the #1 spot. So there's your useless bit of knowledge that you didn't know when sweating to found a new business. So June 2016, you founded. Assuming you don't want to talk about the merits of Drake, can you tell us a little bit more about what you aimed to achieve when you founded the business, and what what were you going to bring to the recruitment market?
Well, it was never my intention to start a recruitment business. My partner Samantha, who at the time I had been with for about 5 years, had already been working in recruitment for a number of years, quite successfully. We've been living outside of Norwich, which is our hometown, which is where we're both originally from, and had decided we want to come back to Norwich and start a family, but also achieve that work-life balance where we would be able to spend time together as a family, and decided that recruitment would probably be the best route forward for us. Samantha had already done very well with the businesses that she'd worked at, and we decided that would enable us to bring in a decent income, and also achieve the work-life balance that we wanted to achieve when we were starting a family. Initially, I was supposed to be a stay-at-home dad until our son went to primary school, while Samantha would launch Alexandrite Recruitment. Her surname is Alexander, which is where Alexandrite comes from. And Alexandrite is also a precious stone, which is her birthstone and my birthstone. And it also changes colours, and they were initially the colours that we were going to use to represent the business as well. So that's a bit of a backstory on where the name came from. After a couple of months, Samantha thought I had it far too easy looking after a newborn. And we decided we'd put him into nursery and I would get him on board with the business as well. Having no prior experience except from the sales experience I had, and understanding obviously the recruitment process, what is involved. I'd been recruited by recruitment companies in the past. Samantha had shared information with me about how the process works, how you target candidates, how you service the clients. And all that was left really was to decide which industry that I would essentially recruit for. I'm not an engineer myself. I had no formal training in engineering, but I'd always been fascinated with engineering and manufacturing, how products end up in our household, in our hands, and things like Scrap Heap Challenge, Robot Wars, Tomorrow's World. All of those programs, I found them absolutely fascinating, and also a bit sad as well that perhaps this hadn't been a world that had been open to me at school as well. So that was the reason behind beginning the journey in the engineering and manufacturing side. It was purely out of interest, an opportunity to learn and find out more about something I enjoyed. And that was really the start of my journey to where I am now.
And how would you describe your sort of region of East Anglia with regard to manufacturing and recruitment? What are the core industries? What are the core sort of areas? How would you describe it? Because obviously, hopefully, we've got a viewership across the UK. East Anglia is that sort of flat land that some of us Midlanders forget ever exists. So tell us a little bit about your world.
It's a very difficult place to recruit for. I think geographically, where we are, it's not a very metropolitan area. I would say probably most people coming to Norfolk, especially, probably people coming here possibly to retire rather than to seek work. So the talent pool externally isn't being refreshed that often. And I think, although it's changing now, I think perhaps the region was a little bit behind the times in terms of their offering, their approach to how they saw employees and the workforce. But we have a real mix of engineering and manufacturing here in East Anglia. Obviously a big agricultural area. Nowadays, a lot of energy here, offshore. We've got Sizewell being built here in East Anglia. Yeah. And on top of that, a lot of food manufacturers, also well known for having Lotus here in Norfolk as well. So very diverse, and perhaps a region which I think is now beginning to realise its full potential, which perhaps when I first started recruitment in East Anglia, I think we were perhaps a bit behind, and our approach was lacking in forethought and dynamism, I suppose, essentially.
Okay. So the show's title has SME in it, which gives obviously a clue to the target audience. So based upon 9 years in recruitment and also what you saw before you came into recruitment, what sort of lessons, what suggestions would you say to SMEs when they look to go about recruitment, whether that's working with an agent or maybe in the earlier stages when they're trying to figure out if it's right for them?
It's difficult to say because I provide a tailored approach depending on the client. I think most business owners would have a strategy or a plan in terms of growth, where they want to end up, whether it's exit the business, sell it, whether it's grow it, pass it on to family. And I think an employee-centric approach is what I would recommend to SMEs. I tend to find in the past it's an us and them, which kind of tends to lead to a bit of a breakdown. No real understanding of why candidates are leaving, why they may be unhappy, and also not planning ahead. If you're going to implement a new technology or launch a new product, how are you going to facilitate that? Yes, you might have the equipment, you might have the resources to do that, but the staff, are they trained well enough to be able to implement this new technology? Is the skills in the business isolated with only a couple of different people? So if they were to leave, would you be in a position to find yourself exposed without able to deliver on the contracts that you were working on? So any good business, I would expect to have a strategy, and as part of that, I would say having a recruitment strategy, whether that's one that you put in place yourself or one that you work with a recruiter like myself on with, to cover short, mid and long-term plans for the business. Okay.
And moving on in terms of your businesses, you very recently, well, relatively recently, set up the new business, Obsidian Global Sourcing. Yes. Apologies, I said recruitment earlier. Obsidian Global Sourcing. Can you tell us how that came about, how it's different to the Alexandrite business, how they work together? Really tell us why in 2025 did you found another business?
So this, from starting Alexandrite recruitment with no prior experience, very little knowledge of the workings of engineering and manufacturing businesses, nothing more than a passion and a desire to learn and get enjoyment from the work that I was doing, led me to where I am today. So the first few years, the business approach of Alexandrite recruitment to bring in money and to get to where we wanted to be sort of financially stable, it was a catch-all recruitment business. Although I specialise in engineering and manufacturing, and Samantha focused more on accountancy and finance, we would recruit for all areas, whether that be office, HR, logistics, transport, any industry. We really didn't sort of pigeonhole ourselves.
Okay.
So over the first few years, up until 2019, we'd done really well, really pleased with the performance of the business. We'd achieved the work-life balance that we wanted, and we had successfully sort of cleared all the debt that we had ourselves from starting the business, and were ready to look to buy our first house. And that was when COVID kicked in. Yeah, really tough for us. A lot of the companies that we were working with put recruitment on hold. And it was a real eye-opener for us that how quickly these things could happen. So it was a tough couple of years. We actually cleaned holiday chalets along the Norfolk coast to make ends meet for those couple of years. And it kind of set us back financially in terms of the goals that we'd set up at looking to buy a house, and made me realise that going forward was going to need to have to work twice as hard to kind of get back to where we were. So for those 3 years, so 22, 23 and 24, I kind of worked with blinkers on. I expanded outside of East Anglia, which, although had served us very well, is quite a difficult region to recruit for in terms of the lack of talent coming into the talent pool. And I branched out, so I covered the whole of the Midlands, the whole of East Anglia, Essex, London, Kent, and from working in those areas, I've worked further afield, all the way down to the southwest. Done roles up in Scotland as well. And it was while I was in this process of building back after COVID that a friend of mine whose son goes to school with my son approached me. He was the head of engineering department at a local college, or local college regionally, and he was moving to another college to be head of the engineering department closer to us. And he knew that I recruited for engineering and manufacturing, and asked if I would be able to support him in making an impact in the new role, improving relations with local employers, and raising the profile of the engineering department, which is part of the reason that he was brought in. So this was my first step into working within the education aspect of engineering. Up until that point, I'd got a good grasp of how the businesses operate, the various areas within the business, from sales, design, project management, the operations side, resources, planning, all of the key elements, but had never really questioned, where does an engineer come from? How does their career start? And not having had any experiences with colleges before, didn't understand the challenges that they faced in terms of recruiting staff, working with industry in order to deliver a curriculum that really matched up with the needs of local businesses. So it was working with the college over a number of months, gave me an insight into, and not just the college that I work with, I think colleges in general have a very difficult time to deliver what industry wants in the time frame that they have, with the resources that they have. And that, for me, someone who's looking to replace people or put in contingency plans for people that are retiring, kind of made me realize, wow, this is a big problem. How are we going to keep feeding people into the industry if we're not putting out enough people, skilled people with the right skills for the local businesses? And that, for me, was when I started to learn more about the skills gap, the deficit we had in terms of students, young engineers coming out of training into the workforce, and started to help me fill in the gaps in terms of why I was often finding it difficult to fill certain positions, why there weren't more young people coming through with the skills that my employers were looking for. And it was shortly after doing the work with the college that I realised, from working in this blinkered way that I had and spreading out over a bigger geographical area, working in education, that I found myself in quite a unique position where I had a 360-degree view of the whole process, if you like, from how someone trains and becomes an engineer to how they go into the workforce, how they then spend a number of years in the workforce to become someone that's time served, to eventually becoming a candidate that I would approach to move into another role or to work for a different company. And realized that as a recruiter, we are not the most liked of people, I would say. If I'm totally honest, I think recruiters are kind of the UK equivalent of seen as the UK equivalent of estate agents in America. It's that, I think it's people feel if you can't get a job doing anything else, that you can go into recruitment. You don't need to have any qualifications, and I think it is accurate stereotype to a degree. I think the model that most traditional recruitment businesses work to make it very difficult for them to provide the kind of service which really delivers what businesses want on a long-term basis. I think they're being heavily targeted on not just the amount of revenue that you bring in, but the number of cold calls that you have to make and the number of marketing emails that you have to make. When so much of your time is taken up with all of these various elements, it leaves very little time to build a real relationship with the business, to really get to grips and spend the time to understand why they need the staff, why they can't find the staff, why they have a high attrition rate. And although the traditional method had served me quite well, I realized that there was much more that could be offered from recruitment than the traditional, someone is leaving or we're growing and we need somebody. Can you find someone? I find someone or several candidates. They interview them, they hire them. And then that's kind of the end of the process. If you do a good job, hopefully the client will come back to you and use you again in the future. But with no money changing hands until you've placed a candidate in the role, there's no reason for an employer not to use multiple agencies. So it didn't really incentivize growing relationships, gaining an understanding of the inner workings of a business, why staff may be leaving, what their plans are for the future, and how they plan to maintain the staff level they need to meet the plans and the growth plans. And it's then that I started to look at how I could provide a different service, a better service, to the point where I realized that what I had to offer needed a new brand. Essentially, I needed something that really represented all the work that I'd done over the last 9 years in engineering and manufacturing, and that I wanted to be more heavily involved, not just in the recruitment side, but doing more within education to help inspire younger people, to be a link between education and industry. Colleges are very busy. They don't have enough resources. They're not able to pay, especially within engineering, the staff the money that they should pay them to attract the right kind of the right level of tutors and lecturers. And then within the role, not only are they doing a very difficult job imparting the skill and experience that they have, but it's also a very difficult environment to work in as well. So very easily companies become frustrated with the colleges. They feel they're not getting what they need, or they're not being listened to. On the flip side, colleges aren't getting the support, the resources, the funding that they need to deliver what they want. And from conversations I had with businesses and from going behind the scenes at colleges and spending time with colleges, lecturers, I realized, again, I was in a unique position where I had heard from both sides and realized that I could play a key role in making the situation better, opening up lines of communication, being a go-between. A lot of small to medium businesses don't often have the personnel, the human resources internally to have someone dedicated to looking after that. And I think that's what puts a lot of companies off taking apprentices or wanting to work with colleges, because it's not a quick way of getting cheap labor. If you're going to bring on an apprentice, you will need somebody dedicated to supporting that apprentice. You're going to need somebody at the back end of the business who is going to be following up with the college, and small to medium businesses. As soon as those elements start coming into play, it's enough to put them off going down that route. So it means that young people are missing out on the opportunity to get out into the workforce. Companies are missing out long term because we're not giving the young people the opportunity at the beginning to become time served, qualified, and reach the level of the person that they want now. And that was why I launched Obsidian Global. It was to work more in education, to offer a wider service to businesses, especially small to medium businesses who don't have the resources to dedicate to onboarding apprentices or working with colleges. And then also beyond that, to try and be an advocate for the skills gap, for young people, for engineering and manufacturing. Because without realizing from the work that I'd done, and then after COVID, working in that sort of blinkered, siloed way of just trying to recover from what happened to COVID, I suddenly stood back and realized, well, actually, you're in a very different position to a traditional recruiter. You've had experiences from the education side to the commercial recruitment side. And I could see that I had a lot more to offer than the traditional recruitment.
Okay, so am I right in thinking if I look, admittedly in remotely, but if I look in and the things I read, you see a lot about the bigger manufacturing businesses maybe being teamed up with the bigger apprenticeship recruitment places. Some FE of those will be FE colleges, some will be independent. But they've obviously got full-time people doing it, and they're pulling through multiple apprentices every year. And that's the sort of the standard model that we see, and is probably the one that is financially supported to some extent. Am I right in thinking that your role is to maybe provide that service to the SMEs who might only take an apprentice every third year, or even they take a few more? They can't have a sort of dedicated HRE/apprentice person. So you're really the glue in between the college and the employer to make that apprenticeship route more likely to succeed.
That's it. Very much so. I like to see myself as your external, internal recruitment function, and not just to recruit people to fill gaps that because somebody's left or because somebody's retiring, but to all aspects of recruitment. So whether that's an apprentice, whether that's workforce planning for new projects or new technology or new products that you might be delivering and making sure you have the skills in the business, right through to the traditional roles where people are retiring, moving house, going off to pastures new. So I really do pride myself on being able to provide that 360 degree service. Sorry.
On the topics of sort of training, and I guess there's a lot said, I'm not sure necessarily if there's a lot of answers given, but there's a lot said about how we go about inspiring the next generation, and perhaps as importantly, keeping the next generation, not just winning them in, but actually keeping them. Do you have any thoughts on that? And again, in particular, how SMEs can be part of that equation? How do we get the youngsters in, but how do we keep the youngsters? And I guess, particularly if we branch out, how particularly do we keep, say, women who come in so that they stay in manufacturing?
I think we need to be doing more at a very early age. As I said, in my own experience, I mean, I'm 40 now, so it's a long time since I was at school, but I was never in, apart from in sort of design and technology, and even then not given a commercial understanding of how these things are applied in engineering and manufacturing or in the workplace, and having little understanding of the roles that were out there: welding, machining, assembly, design, project management. None of these opportunities are given or explained at a young age. And I think you ask most young children what they'd like to be. I mean, it may be different now, but police officers or a footballer, you tend to want to be the things that you know and have been exposed to. Some children, their parents are engineers or a musician, or if you have someone in your family that has already followed that career path, you have that exposure to it. But outside of that, I think we need to be really giving children an idea of what roles there are in engineering and inspiring them with engaging activities, talks, discussions, events, to open their eyes up to it, and then be consistent throughout the schooling, through primary school into high school, taking them on factory tours. And they are the kind of companies, the ones that engage in those kind of activities, especially in my region, the ones that I know that engage in those kind of activities, they often don't have a need for people like myself. They understand, they already get that to solve the problem, you have to be part of the solution from the beginning. People are very quick to complain or moan about the system, the current system, how it works. It's not how it used to be, or we don't get this, we don't get that. But I think we're in a situation where it's been the way that it has for so long that we can't expect to see any change from above, and that in order to see to achieve the change that we want, we have to be a part of that. And I'm seeing a big change in people's approach to that now, the collaboration, the grassroots, the being the change that you want to see, rather than expecting someone else to do that, as much as it may eat into your time and may require additional resources. If you're not part of the solution, as they say, essentially you're part of the problem.
Are there any good examples or sources of information or case studies, or if you were to point an SME who was from a different part of the country to some source of information or some example of how you think things should be done nowadays, what would you say, or where would you direct people?
Well, there's a company not far actually from myself. They're in Thetford, a company called, I think they're called Warren now, or Warren Services, I think they were called previously. Yeah. They really are a shining example of everything that I've spoken about. So they donate resources and materials to colleges and schools so that kids, youngsters can get exposure to that to engineering and manufacturing, things like 3D printers or raw materials for building and constructing things. They open up their factory. They are predominantly sort of a sheet metal, subcontract sheet metal manufacturer. So a lot of welding, cutting. They do have some CNC equipment on site. And they open up the factory to school tours. Will Bridgman, the managing director there, is very, very passionate about inspiring the next generation, always putting out content about the work that they do, always recruiting locally. I don't think they've, in the last few years, had any need to use a recruitment agency because of the approach that they take. They're well known in the local area. They give praise and recognition to staff who have done well within the business. And they engage with local councils, local industry bodies, so manufacturing groups. They play a key role in a lot of industry manufacturing groups. And they put into action all of the things that they talk about. They don't just talk about them, they do them. So for me, when I'm talking to a client about the things that they could do or how they could achieve that, not expecting the business to be able to do that overnight. Will and the team at Warren are a different breed. They're very dedicated to what they do. They've got a long history of doing it. But I think moving in that direction can bring nothing but great results for the region, whichever region you're in, and for the company itself.
Now, I think they're a great example because they're easy for people to look up on LinkedIn and just see snapshots of what they've done. And yes, they're not a car company, or, you know, we all read and kind of expect these big companies to do these amazing things. And for an SME, yeah, the first route of thought is, well, we're not a car company. We're not a massive international company. What can we do? Yep. So I think you've come up with a fantastic suggestion with Warren there. And yeah, they are as simple to find on LinkedIn as just look for Warren, W-A-R-R-E.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. That was brilliant. I'm going to wrap up or move to the sort of more mundane and weekend type questions.
Okay.
Particularly because people tend to watch this at the weekend. Can I ask you to tell me about a topic that you enjoy about talking about to somebody if you were stood in the kitchen? So you've not stood on a Teams call, not sat on a Teams call, not sat looking at the computer like we are now. What do you really talk about that you enjoy talking about at the pub, a party, a barbecue? What's your thing?
Well, being in the kitchen, it'd probably be food. I love to cook. That's probably outside of doing recruitment and Obsidian Global, that's probably my biggest passion. I do a lot of cooking, especially Indian food, traditional, authentic Indian food. I cook all of that from scratch myself, much to the dismay of my other half, complaining that all of our clean washing now smells of garlic and ginger and onion. But I love to hear from other people. When you've worked in sales for as long as I have, especially the kind of sales I was in at the beginning, you spend a lot of time talking. You're waiting for an objection to come. You handle the objection and you've only got one objective in mind. And doing the work that I do now, I spend much more time listening. And I find there's much more to be learned from life by listening. So for me, if I can just get somebody talking about themselves, I'm all ears. I love to find out about people's lives, their families, their experiences, where they've been, music, what they enjoy listening to, what their pastimes are, their hobbies.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Which is my working life is sensors, and I do love them, but I'd much rather hear people talk about things as diverse with passion about food or motorbikes or football or whatever it is. It's that sort of human enthusiasm that wins through, isn't it? It makes such a change.
That is one of the best things. Yeah, but that's one of the best things about recruiting for engineering and manufacturing is that the people you speak with are genuinely passionate about it. I think that's what I really love about the industry, is that you don't just get into this and just do it to sort of pass the time or to pay the bills. I think the people who succeed and do really well in engineering and manufacturing, and the reason they get into it in the first place is the passion for it. And I think that's what's kept me going so long and has really given me the passion, given me the bug, is that the passion that the people I speak to have.
Yeah, and the diversity. Yeah.
We
sell a relatively simple product. That's not the interesting thing. The interesting thing is how it makes so many different diverse machines work. You know, whether they're car factories, wind turbines, F1 teams, whatever they are. Every conversation is different, even if the enabler is kind of the same. So I'm with you on that. It's a traditional question to ask: what have you got planned, or what do you hope to achieve in the next 12 months? And that could be personal, that could be work, it could be both, it can be the ultimate curry. What's your objective? What's your dream for the next 12 months?
So business wise, I only launched Obsidian Global in April, but ideally within the next year I'd like to have hired a member of staff. Finding it very difficult to do the traditional recruitment as well as the advocacy and the education work that I do as well now. Part of what I do for my own personal development, but also for my clients, is training in engineering and manufacturing related disciplines as well. So last year I did TIG welding, City and Guilds TIG welding level 1 last year. That was the first role that I ever recruited for when we launched Alexandrite Recruitment, which is why as the first course, the first training that I did, that was why I chose that. But in the pipeline now, I've got MVQ level 3 in mechanical engineering, which I'm going to tackle. And more advocacy work. I'm working quite closely with EGA, which is the East of England Energy Group. They're focused on the energy sector here in the UK, from oil and gas to on and offshore wind and everything else in between. And they're doing a lot of work at the moment on the energy skills for energy, which is focused on the skills gap regionally here, getting people into the workforce. So a lot of my time will be taken up doing that. How profitable that is, I don't know, but it's something that I've got a huge passion for it now. And I think since having a child of my own has made me realise that you have to be the change that you want to see, and you have to get involved. And I think the position that I'm in now, from having seen things from every angle, I'm in a really unique position to hopefully make a big difference there. Outside of work, I started boxing last year. Always thoroughly enjoyed boxing. That's why I avoided talking about boxing at the beginning, because it would have been a long conversation about boxing. So I avoided that. But I was hoping last year, before I turned 40, to box as an amateur, because 40 is the cutoff point. But I hurt my back in the house move last year, so I missed my opportunity for that. So hopefully in the coming months, I can get signed off by a doctor, and I'd really like to do some white collar boxing is the plan in my personal life. Yeah.
Oh, cool. So to help you achieve those sort of objectives in the next 12 months, how do they go about finding out more about Alexandrite, Obsidian, and how would they go around following or contacting yourself?
So at the moment, our social media is quite limited. We are just on LinkedIn at the moment, but there are plans in place for Obsidian Global to, as I do more in education now and I need to reach out to a younger audience, we'll be moving on to Facebook, Instagram, hopefully collaborate with some other people I know to put some TikTok videos together as well to try and inspire young people. But the website, you can go to the Obsidian Global website, which is www.ogsourcing.co.uk or www.alexandriterecruitment.co.uk to go to the Alexandrite website, or you can find us on LinkedIn.
Excellent. Okay, and I'll put links in the post if people read the original post I put out for this. So I will almost wrap up. I'll quickly say thanks very much for being a guest this week. Thank you for the work you do in sort of trying to bridge that gap between the FE colleges, who I feel are incredibly under-resourced, and the manufacturers out there that want the resource but maybe don't have the time to find it and develop it. So my final invitation to you is, do you have a final sentence, question, observation or thought that you want to sign off with?
No, just to say that I think we're at quite a pivotal point now where people understand that change needs to be made if we want to continue heading in the direction that we are. So I just encourage everybody to be open-minded. Don't just complain, take some action and be the change that you want to see.
Yep. Sounds good to me. It's a pretty good way to wrap up. So I will thank you very much, Morgan. I will do the very boring small text at the end of the advert, so to speak, and say that if people would like to get in touch with the show with a comment, a suggestion, or particularly if you'd like to appear in a future episode, please email us at inquiries@mtdcnc.com or contact myself, Stuart Whitehead, or Joe Reynolds. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. From me, Mark Weymouth at the Sensor Specialist Plus Automation. Cheers. Have fun.